Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Perspective. We'll be talking about the constitution of the Special Investment Facilitation Center with the aim of trying to attract as much FDI in Pakistan and the kind of measures that are expected in the next couple of weeks to put Pakistan on the kind of roadmap to success as far as economy is concerned that the government is expecting, the kind of measures that will invariably be involved to set the right direction for Pakistan as far as economy is concerned. All of that today on Perspective. I have with me Mohammad Shaaf Najib, who's a research fellow with Pakistan Institute of Development Economics. Thank you for being with us today. We also have with us Dr. Khaqan Najeeb, who's former advisor to Ministry of Finance. Thank you for being with us. And Dr. Qais Aslam, who's an economist. Thank you for joining us today. Shaaf sahab, like we were earlier saying, as far as economy is concerned, certainly there are no two opinions on the fact that we are in the midst of a very real challenge, to say the least, as far as economy is concerned. Attracting investment in this kind of a climate is particularly a taxing endeavor to take as far as the government is concerned. How do you look at it, and what kind of measures do you see happening in the next couple of weeks?
Well, thank you for having me at the show. And there's no doubt in the fact that we are going through one of our hardest patch as far as economy is concerned. And in this, the government has been trying its best to try and meet our financing gap while also trying to turn the economy's wheel to let the economic activity grow. But of course, we are at this point in a situation of stagflation, which means that our growth is stagnant and there is a high inflation as well, which makes it very tricky for the government to enable economic activity from sources within. And that is where the role of the foreign direct investment or investment from foreign investors comes in, where that acts as a catalyst in order to help the economic activity grow and for the country to escape this situation of stagflation by running economic activity in the country. And for that, it is important that we are able to create enabling environment for investment, and that has to be not just for the foreign investors but also for the domestic investors, because whenever any foreign investor does come, it comes and works in close collaboration in various forms with the local investor and local businesses as well. So I think it's very important that we look at our regulations at first, which are preventing economic activity, so that we are able to enable foreign investors and attract them, because whenever you try and go and talk to the foreign investors about you should come and invest in Pakistan, the first question that they ask is why. Because let's be honest, all that they think about is, or any investor considers, is where are they going to make the most profit. But if any investor is tangled in various forms of regulations and processes and time-taking processes, actually, that's when that economy does not become very feasible for them. So I think.
Let me come back to you on that. I'm going to go to Dr. Khaqan. Dr. Khaqan, let's be honest, there have been measures to facilitate businesses to attract FDI before also. How do you perceive this to be any different, and how do you perceive this to actually work as far as economy is concerned? You need to unmute yourself. Dr. Khaqan?
Sorry.
Now I can hear you.
So Mahrukh, good to be with you again. So Mahrukh, you have to see where the country stands. You have to do a diagnostics of where our investment ecosystem stands, and then you can make a judgment what's the need and what's the response required. So Mahrukh, if you look at the most important figure that every Pakistani should be seriously concerned about, in the fiscal year 05, our investment to GDP, simply understanding how much were we investing compared to what the overall production in the country was, used to be around 18%. So our investment as a percentage of GDP was hovering around 18%. In FY23, which we are about to close, it has unfortunately come down to 13.6% of GDP. Now, all the countries which have done well. Now, I've used the word all and very carefully. The East Asian miracle, your neighbor India, Vietnam, Indonesia, and your best friend China. This figure alone, Mahrukh, is 30%. So they invest almost, it's if you have like a farm or something, so they are putting 3 seeds compared to you putting 1 seed, just to easily understand it. Both our private sector investment and our public sector investment have literally gone down. And I wish I could screen share right now. And you would see from 18 to 14.9 to 13.6. This is the gravity of the situation, and investment alone produces productivity, produces exportable surpluses, and we have not been able to do it. Now, so what did we do? So we made a BOI, which was Board of Investment, and the task given to the Board of Investment was to do exactly what we are trying to do now, is to mainly go to the international investor, seek international investment, try to lure international investors. But the performance since '05 to today is what I've just pointed to you. So there is a need to do something and do it differently. One way ideally would have been we revamp Board of Investment. I have always said, until unless you professionalize these areas, unless you bring a chairperson in the Board of Investment who has been working, selling something, who knows how to market, who knows how to market countries. That's the first thing to do. Maybe she can do it for us. Then a team which re-regulates Pakistan. In 2016, Mahrukh, I wrote a book. It is lying on the website of Board of Investment. It is called Ease of Doing Business in Pakistan. This book was written with, I think, World Bank, BOI, and everyone put together when I used to head the reform area in Pakistan. That book is valid even today because nothing great has changed. We have not been able to re-regulate. So then comes the SIFC. The model of SIFC, in my mind, is what we did successfully. What did we do successfully? When we came to do FATF, Mahrukh, I think that was the most difficult task to do because we had to coordinate provinces, federal government, law enforcement agencies, the armed forces. So armed forces played a coordinating role in that. That's the truth. And we were able to do 27 points in one matrix. And then there was an Asia Pacific group which gave another 6. And I was in Paris. I remember talking about it to the OECD people who had given us all this. And I said, this must be the most difficult task Pakistan has ever done in record time. I think SIFC is kind of emulating that behavior. The thing that I think needs to be changed in SIFC is that it is fine to go
let's
after
come back and talk more about this. I'll come and talk about this with you. I want to go to Dr. Qais also, but essentially, Dr. Qais, as far as what Dr. Khaqan is saying, when we see the role of, for example, the Board of Investment, there, these are measures that were also taken, earlier on. What do you think? Where did the last government go wrong? Do you think it was a lot about political instability? Do you think it was a lot about a lot of hyperbole that perhaps didn't translate into tangible outcomes? Where did they fail? I'm only asking so that we learn from there and we don't go down the same road as the last time.
Thank you, Mahrukh. I think my both colleagues have said wonderful things and they are all correct. Your question, where do we go wrong? Look, what I've seen over the many years that I'm looking into the economy of Pakistan is that we have concentrated our entire efforts on people who have money or people who are highly educated, which is very good. But the trickle-down effect has never happened. Neither our infrastructure, nor our education system, nor our skill basis, nor our industrial transformation, our energy sources, our water sources, our lands, we have not, and more so, the institutional reforms that are needed. Now we have gone into a complex situation where all these problems have piled up and we don't know where to begin. We still think that foreign investor is a magic wand which is going to fix everything. That is not the case. Till such time we have legal reforms in place. We bypass the incumbent bureaucracy in all this. So I think the board might be a good option and direction, but at the same time, if you do not see reforms uh, and ease of doing business on the ground, and if we do not see our skill-based industrial reforms, I don't think even these measures are going to give us results. I hope they do, but I think that we need very seriously to come up with a long-term plan, with a medium-term plan, and a midget plan of restructuring our basics, which are our 4 factors of production, our management skills, our ability to transfer that knowledge which the foreigners
I think, let me interject here. I think that what you're saying is essentially correct. I don't think anybody can disagree with what you're saying. But the question is that, when we all primarily agree on structural reform, we all agree that this needs to trickle down. The point is, if the government doesn't have that kind of fiscal space to go in that direction, to undertake those measures, what does it do?
The government should become small. The government should make sure that the resources that there are, especially the tax that is collected, should be collected from the direct taxes and then spent on where the economy lies, rather than increasing salaries of people who are not delivering, rather than having these large ministers, which is a political thing. So I think the government has that space. The government does not have the will to use that space.
Right, fair enough. Let me come back to you on that note. Mohammad, Shaaf Sahab, do you think it's that simple? Do you think that we can actually, pin it down to what Dr. Qais is saying, that the government should become small? We talk about, measures that are politically, perhaps, they might resonate with the masses. We saw a lot of them in the last government. There was a lot that was said, that there should be less spending, and then, talking about making universities out of government institutions, things like that. That didn't really work. That didn't do anything for the economy. So what do we do in that kind of a environment?
As you talked about deficits, of course there are 2 ways how a deficit can be reduced. One, increasing your revenues, and second, by reducing expenditures. Now, coming firstly on the expenditure side, as Qais Saab said, reducing the size of the government. Now, reducing the size of the government, I don't see it only as the size of the cabinet, but it's more about the size of the government agencies, the losses that the public sector enterprises are making. Now, if we see, there are only within Islamabad, there are over 130 different authorities that are working, a lot of them doing similar sort of work. So when I talk about reducing the size of the government, I talk about reducing the size of these government agencies which are taking a large chunk of government's expenditure. Okay. If we see, a lot of expenditure within the budget is also going towards pensions and the salaries of these government employees. So that's when I talk about reducing the size of the government. That's the focus that I put on.
But when we see the measures that have been taken currently in the budget, one of them being that there is, drawing multiple pensions have been, there's a reduction there, it has to be one. Then, if you talk about these funds that, that's going to be a consolidation of your own, as I understand, your own salary, which is going to be able to pay you at the end of the year, as I understand.
Absolutely. Pension reform is, I think, one of the major positive things coming out of this budget, and I hope that it is implemented immediately and fully, where the pension should be funded, and any future pensions should also be contributory. And then comes the thing about reducing the expenditure, something that the IMF and the World Bank have always focused a lot on maintaining Pakistan. But that increasing revenue always comes from increasing the current tax rates, where the current taxpayers have to pay more. But I think it's time that the government looks towards its dead capital, its housing assets, which alone currently are valued over 1.4 trillion. So if we can regenerate them, we can attract a lot of investment within them, use those government land and government infrastructure to generate a lot of economic activity. So there have to be actions from the revenue side, as well as the expenditure side, both to reduce that deficit and create more fiscal space.
I'm going to go to Dr. Khaqan. I'll come back to you. Dr. Khaqan, is it that simple? Do you think that, when we talk about structural reform, when we talk about white elephants, when we talk about, institutions that are just, taking money out in terms of, and not giving back anything to the economy, things like this, which invariably flow into, and one kind of reform flows into the other, then it's the legal reform, then it's, like we saw earlier on, one window operations, things like this. Are these really out of the box solutions?
So Mahrukh, I've always said that, you correct your basics. So as I was saying, if you can correct your BOI, you can put in some meat there, and then you can re-regulate the economy. This is something you can do in the medium term. But I always say in countries like Pakistan or in many developing countries, you have to sometimes bypass the system. The arteries are very clogged by the bureaucratic hurdles, by the hurdles mentioned of the number of agencies around. So you bypass them. SIFC is going to try and bypass those and try and sell, for example, something, lease the ports. There is something in the offing from Middle East without going into detail. So they're going to try and ease that. The one thing I can tell you is that, for example, the refinery project. In 2019, His Royal Highness MBS was in the country. I remember being there, when this was being debated and discussed, $10 to $20 billion of a project. I'm talking to you in June 23, we haven't moved. So the one way is for SIFC to bypass the normal systems and get these in. And for Pakistan right now, that is maybe a good thing to do. CPEC 2, same kind of stoppages. So this is something that you can do. But in the medium term, what you really have to do is what I think three of us are kind of trying to hint, that you ease the business, ease the industry, ease the agriculture by reducing the footprint of the government. That is what we are trying to say. So you give me 2-3 minutes and tell you exactly what you need to do, right? So you go and look at your budget numbers, and then you will realize what you need to do. Mahrukh, I used to be in the government, and I remember saying this on the table. The pensions about 6-7 years ago were 250 billion rupees for the federal government. And I said, these are going to double, we should be doing something. Today, I was wrong. They, in 6 years or 7 years, have become 801 billion rupees. That is what the authorities announced yesterday. A pension reform has started. I commend the authorities for doing it, but the kind of push that is needed, stop having new entrants in the federal government. Stop giving the new entrants any kind of state-funded pension so that we can break the trajectory. Then, the easiest way to reduce your size, I can understand closing these agencies is a difficult bit. This is something very easy to do. 17 subjects have been devolved to the provinces. Mahrukh, we have even given monies in NFC to the provinces. Let's go and tell them that now you handle health, you handle education, you handle zakat and ushar, and let's save about 400 billion rupees. This is a recent World Bank study on them, a very, very recent study on public financial management. And, that's why I'm quoting you the figure from it. General subsidy regime, we don't want to give subsidy to fertilizer. You want to give subsidy to an agriculture farmer? Very much so, at his doorstep, at her doorsteps. BESP is a great program. Let's do it. So, you have to start thinking about expenditure efficiency, government efficiency in a very, you call it out of box, or you call it, I call it more than going to basics kind of approach. So you combine that with, for the time being, circumventing the investment climate, which is clogged in the country. The only thing missing in this equation is the domestic investor. My interaction on SIF.
If you allow me to interject, the question, if you don't have the kind of, confidence, if your domestic investor doesn't have the kind of confidence needed to invest, how is a foreign, how are you going to get FDI to come in? This may be a very basic question, but I think that people want to know the answer to this, no?
So that's absolutely right. So, there also, I've always, whenever I research on Pakistan, you look at the figures. So, Mahrukh, there are 5.2 million small and medium enterprises in the country, right? Now, you really need to go to them. You really need to upgrade them. You need to include them in the financial inclusion strategy. You need a lot of things. You need to get these universities to go and educate them. You really need to do a lot of work.
So a lot
They
of
will
work has to
then
be
go
done.
and
So a lot of work has to be done in that sector, and I'll come back to you and let you answer this, to be fair, but I have to go to Abid Qayyum Suleri, who's head of independent policy think tank, STPI. Ji, Suleri sahab, can you hear me? Abid sahab, can you hear me?
Ji,
Abid sahab, we're talking about, of course, the fact that at this time we're looking at the constitution of a special investment facilitation center, and of course also that, the one integral issue at this time is infusing the kind of confidence needed into the investor at this time, whether it's your domestic investor, whether it's your foreign investor. How do you do that, in your opinion?
Well, first, I think this special investment financial council, that is a welcome move in our current context. We already saw in 2018-2019 when the past government it signed billions of dollars of MOUs with Saudis, with Turkish, with Malaysian, UAE, and Qatari, but none of that investment could actually be materialized, and the reason was simple. That there were procedural hurdles, there were bureaucratic hurdles, and there were policy inconsistency and lack of policy continuity. Then move on, fast forward, if you come to 2022, 2023, part of the reason that IMF deal it got toppled because we couldn't get financial assurances from our friendly countries due to political instability, but also due to the reason that there was no one to provide them assurance or guarantees that if they are obliging Pakistan at this time of the moment, government of Pakistan, whoever it would be take care of their interests at international arena. So in this context, I really feel that this establishment of this council is a good move. From STPI as an organization, in my personal capacity, we have been advocating for National Economic Security Council, a council where we should have our civil and military leadership that could provide the sort of assurances, the sort of guarantees, the sort of policy consistency which is required. A council where all stakeholders, they could take care of some sort of way forward for our economy, charter of economy you can call it, or whatever name, but for the 4 to 5 year of a roadmap for economic revival. And I think in that context, I'll support this council and hope that it would be able to function well.
Suleri Sahab, let me come back to you.
Yeah.
Shaaf Sahab, what Suleri Sahab is saying is essentially, of course, everybody wants that there should be a charter of economy. We have recently had statements, whether it's from Zardari Sahab, whether it's from the Prime Minister himself, on agreement of a charter of economy. Of course, we're very close to the elections at this time, as far as whatever shape the government takes later on pursuant to the elections. Do you think that this is going to be, it's actually doable? Do you see a charter of economy in the future? Because that really seems to be the only way forward, because we've seen a lot of upheaval, whether it's political or economic.
Personally, I think even more so than a charter of economy outside the parliament, the consensus must come within the parliament, because that is where the representatives elected by the people of Pakistan are sitting together, and that's where the mandate is. So I think we need to enhance the role of the parliament in our policy making as well, where collectively the government and the opposition debate and come to a policy which we can take forward, not just for 1 year or one government, but for the next 10 to 20 years. Let's take example of India. They were on verge of bankruptcy in 1990, right? But then came Manmohan Singh as their finance minister, and the macroeconomic policies that were introduced at that time, they carried forward, whether it was BJP in shape of Vajpayee, whether it was Manmohan coming in as a prime minister, or then 10 years of Narendra Modi. The macroeconomic policies were consistent. They were carried forward from the work that was done in the early 1990s, and that has brought them on the horizon of the world economy. And regardless of whatever micro issues they might be facing, the world now looks to work with them, and that is something that Pakistan can actually achieve. And I think instead of because what I see Charter of Economy is more like a forward looking reform agenda for economic progress, and I feel that rather than doing it outside of the parliament, the role of the parliament must be enhanced, and that collective ideas and that collaboration must come from within the parliament, because those are the people that the general public of the Pakistan elect to represent them and make decisions for them.
Let me go to Dr. Khaqan on this. Dr. Khaqan, do you agree what Mohammad Shaaf is saying? He's saying that, regardless of political affiliations, and we've spoken about this, a number of times, that there should be a charter of economy, it should be, but empowering the parliament, regardless of which party, and making sure that the people there in the house are, unified in whatever, like Shaaf Saab is saying, the macroeconomic policy remains the same. Do you see that happening in the future?
Mahrukh, to be honest, there have been many charters. I've seen people try and write things, and I think these are weak documents. They lack the operational capability. Doing real work, getting things done within the government is something very different. Writing a good charter and then going to the granular level, then going to the micro level, really identifying the sequence of the reforms, that's something very different, and I don't think anyone is even attempted to do so. The charters that people and universities have put together, these are good initial thoughts. My sense on this is a little different. I think the parties need to empower themselves with good, smart people, with men and women who can really show them before they go into elections what can be achieved in the electoral cycle that they take over.
Do you think that the parties have not had smart people?
I don't think any party has been able to ever put together a think tank. When I mean smart people, these are politically very astute and smart people. I mean, people's parties had people for ages. They are, politically more savvy than I am. PMLN has had, PTI has tried to put together. But economics, finance, energy, investment, these are professional areas. These are very different areas. Parties have to come out of thinking about them that, we write a manifesto. If we go and read many of the manifestos, many of the things would be very common. Would anyone say that we want to make losses in the energy? Yet every party has made losses in the energy. Every party, starting from General Musharraf to till where I even talk to you, we make a loss on the energy sector efficiencies every single day. So, there has to be fundamentally some rethink on part of the parties, what they want to deliver. Till the parties, before coming into power, decide to do granular micro level work by really hiring people in these subsectors and then bringing in a team. In some sectors, you have to professionalize. Q Block, the finance division, same with the privatization, investment and energy. These 4 areas are not going to work with a generalist setup. I'm quite clear on that.
That failure, in your opinion, because you've been associated with, economy for a long time. You've also worked with the PMLN also. Do you feel that, generally speaking, why is there across the board, all parties, why is there this inability to develop? Is it perhaps a sense of direction that is missing? What is the problem here?
To be honest, I think they spend a lot more time trying to be in the government or come back to the government rather than, playing well when they are in the government. So that thought process has to change, and we have to, ask them as citizens, as voters, what is in the next 5 years? Sell 2 RLNG plants. I'm okay with that, but at least do that. Since 17, we have been trying to sell these 2 RLNG plants. In 23, I'm still saying the same thing, go ahead, sell them. What I'm trying to say is they have to then think of some kind of smart women and men who can come and do it for them. They don't have to become, the ministers or something. I still think the leaderships in the ministries should be with the elected representatives. But underneath them, they must form areas
The work has to be done
of
by
expertise.
professionals, you're saying. Right, fair enough. Let me go to Dr. Qais. Dr. Qais, do you agree? You think that, that development as far as having think tanks or having professional people do the work, of course we need politicians, and we have very educated, also able politicians, electables. We have people, who are constituency politics savvy. We have people who are, very competent. But in terms of having, as far as economy is concerned, we need perhaps professionals to do that work, which is what Dr. Khaqan is saying. On the other hand, there is of course this question of charter of economy. Which do you think is one of those integral, or both needs to be done now at this stage?
Thank you very much. I think Dr. Khaqan is right. Charter of economy is just simply that whatever government comes, the policies carry on. But then technologies change, then the international situation changes and such forth. But the point is,
also have to change necessarily.
We need these professionals with every minister, with every so that they can advise the right thing to the right person. But one thing which is needed, which has not been done by any government, although any textbook of economics will tell you, is an incentive-based approach. When you give incentives to the private sector to invest or to export, whether they are foreigners or whether they are, and put some conditions that technology has to be transferred, a certain level of employment has to be generated, a certain level of tax has to be created, things start happening. But what I have seen is past government and this government is that they are more interested in getting the tax revenue from any source rather than giving incentives to the or economic incentives in the context. I'm not talking about subsidies. I'm talking about economic. For example, if you want to increase exports or if you want to diversify exports and all this, and the other thing is if you want to invest in your ports or if you want to invest in your mining sector and agriculture sector. So I think I'm not. My heart is not with the charter of economy, but my heart is what Dr. Najib is saying, that we should have specialists which can advise ministers or politicians on specific subjects.
Right, I'm going to go to Suleri Saab. Suleri Saab, can you hear me? Suleri Saab, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Suleri Saab, the debate here is between having professionals do the work for in the political realm as far as economy is concerned. I may be wrong, but I think that there have been professionals, and I may be, correct me if I'm wrong. As far as your economy is concerned, there is no dearth of educated professionals as far as Pakistan is concerned to point us in the right direction. There is also no dearth of educated, competent politicians in the same arena, and again, regardless of political affiliations. But the point is, what are those next steps that need to be taken, ASAP, for us to put us in that place where we become investor friendly, whether it's domestic or
I think there is it's not a matter of either charter of economy or competent person. Both of them are required.
Okay.
Of course, we require professional people, but then we also need to see that how we can get this economy, which has been sacrificed in the hand of politics all the time, how we can stop this phenomenon. And the only way to stop this phenomenon is where the mainstream parties, they agreed not to criticize the issues of economic importance. For example, revival of state-owned enterprises. For example, this whole 18th Amendment and can we reduce the size of federal government or not? For example, how we can reduce transmission and distribution losses of energy. So all these things, they need to be done, and they couldn't be done in the past because whenever a government tries to do it, it immediately becomes a political issue and opposition exploits it. Right now, for example, the taxes, which are passed in this.
So politics. So then again, invariably, let me go to Shaaf Sahab with this. Shaaf Sahab, what Suredi Sahab is saying is that that politics on the issue of economy needs to stop. It has to be like you said yourself, when we talk about an economic charter, yes, what Dr. Khaqan is saying is that there have been many charters, and there have been. But the question is, when there is politics played on, when you see the last government and you look at what happened as far as increasing fuel prices is concerned, for example, the delay there, which we saw what happened as far as the confidence, the lack of confidence we've seen in the IMF. Also, we've seen, it has affected the relationship between Pakistan and the fund. We have to now acknowledge that what the last government did. Politics has to stop when the greater good or the greater good of the economy has to be taken, and that has to prevail over your political capital.
Well, absolutely. I think one of the major issues that has happened with Pakistan's economic policies is the election cycle. And it's not down to just one government or one political party, but it has been a repeated episode in each and every government, be it a political government or even if we had, you could say, the times when we had non-political governments as well. We saw that the major focus on was on projects instead of policies for selling them during the election cycle. And I think that's what needs to change. And of course, that has to change when politics comes out of mere sloganeering about economy, and it comes about debating and challenging each other on the economic plan that they present for the for the policy making of the country and in front of the general public, right? So I think it's important that we define, as other colleagues have been talking about here, we define and differentiate between the political positions in the government setup and where we need professionals. And I think
that is what Dr.
Yes,
Khaqan
exactly.
said, yes.
So I think, of course, the leadership and the vision has to come from the elected representatives, but the implementation and the devising of the policy, that needs to come from professionals who have years of experience of working there. And I think that's one thing that I think is lacking within this SIFC as well, that there isn't any inclusion of people from academia or think tanks in that. And I think in order to further strengthen this, we need to add those people, because we have seen, as Dr. Khaqan mentioned about FATF, I'd add one more, NCOC, regarding the COVID times, when all stakeholders, be it regardless of their institutional, regardless of their political, regardless of their government alignment, they sat together and decided what is necessary. The same was implemented by a single party in federal as well as in the other in the provincial. So that collaborative effort needs input from think tanks and academia as well.
Unfortunately, that's all the time that we have. Thank you so much for being with us. Mohammad Shaaf Najib, thank you for joining us. Dr. Khaqan Najeeb, thank you for being with us. Dr. Qais Aslam, thank you for joining us today. Abid Qayyum Suleri Saab, thank you for being with us today. Of course, in the sense that what is needed to set the right kind of tone as far as our economy is needed, as far as our economy is concerned, and also to infuse the kind of confidence that we need in our domestic as well as our foreign investor. Of course, measures have to come and rise above party political considerations. And of course, the role that professionals must play in this is going to be the primary focus. We've seen the government at this time, the finance ministry, the economic team grappling with economy. We've seen the finance minister hard at work as far as trying to set the right kind of direction for Pakistan. We've seen all stakeholders come up with this special investment facilitation center, and we hope that it will become all that it inspires to be, all that it hopes to be for Pakistan, and it attracts the kind of investment we need. Thank you so much for joining us today on Perspective.